All right, Jerry, let me start with you now. You're on a crusade to bring back the stakeout police units employed in New York in the 60s and early 70s. Before we get into the controversial aspects of this, would you please explain how they operated and what they were?
Sure, Mo. The stakeout squads were fantastically successful in that they went into high-crime areas, they waited for these onion heads to come in, they confronted them, and generally speaking, blew them away, which is exactly what we want. We want to raise the body count of the opposition, not the body count of the good people.
Oh, wait a second. Did they blow them away if they were unarmed?
No, no. These were armed, legitimate confrontations.
Okay.
Where they had been working over particular areas, and these brave hero New York City trained police officers would confront them, and if they resisted arrest, they would do their duty. But today, we have wiped out the squad. We've pulled them out because the mealy-mouthed liberals don't want to harm the criminals. Gentlemen like this are apologists for the criminals, and that's a disgrace.
Well, I don't know. We haven't heard from the commissioner yet. I think it's only fair we give him a chance. Commissioner, how could anyone, especially someone like yourself, who I know upholds law and order and have served the NYPD, oppose a unit that protects the citizens and teaches criminals a serious lesson?
It's not the opposition to the unit, it's the opposition to the methodology of the unit. This is a country of laws and a country which has traditionally held human life in great regard. And to create a situation where the communication to the person who may be a robber and may have a loaded weapon is to take his life is not the kind of communication that we want. I would think it would be better if we would have a situation whereby there was an alternative to the ultimate decision of government to take the person's life, i.e. better barricades or perhaps a different format in doing that.
Better barricades, in other words, something more for the taxpayer to pay for, something more for the store owner to pay for, not for the criminal.
Well, it would not be for the store owner. It would be for the police officer's department, the respective department there. And it would be also to ensure the life of the officer being kept safe, as well as the store owner, and as well making sure that only as a last resort the life of the perpetrator was taken.
Mr. Jerry, Walton's position basically echoes his boss, Mario Cuomo, who is against the death penalty. You're dealing with a governor who believes in pardoning cop killers. So how can you deal with this testimony?
Let's be very clear. Mario Matthew Cuomo, a good friend of mine for many years, is not my boss.
You didn't get your job through Mr. Cuomo?
People of the state of New York are my boss. And Mel Miller, wait a minute. And my appointing officer is the Honorable Melvin Miller, the Speaker of the Assembly.
Also anti-death penalty. In other words, apologize for the killers, but let's just incarcerate the bad guys. We're the only ones that face the death penalty, the people in the streets.
Let me ask the commissioner, what's wrong with a trained police officer gunning down some violent sleazeball trying to knock over the corner mom-and-pop grocery store?
There's nothing wrong in the government exercising its authority when there's no alternative.
See, I don't like the word the government exercising their authority. I like the word the people exercising their authority.
Okay, well, then let's say the people, through the government which they have appointed. The ultimate authority on the street is the police officer. The police officer is the only one where someone is not tried after indictment and arrest, allowed to have a court hearing, allowed to have an appeals process. The law enforcement officer on the street can take life, can be the prosecutor.
Can't anymore. He's so handcuffed now, Commissioner. I mean, the guy has to be shot 9 times before he has enough time to pull his gun and decide that the guy's after him to kill him.
That's not quite true, because in this country this year, over 300 people in the city of New York will be killed by, I think my figures are accurate, by law enforcement personnel carrying out their duty. So that's not quite true that the police officers are handcuffed.
All right, let me come back to Jerry. Well, Jerry, in your opinion, what is your opinion of those guys who served in the 60s and 70s on those stakeout squads? Were they indeed well trained for their jobs?
They were fabulously well trained, Mort. They performed their duty according to specific guidelines. There was a confrontation, and they were allowed to use deadly force, just like a citizen can use deadly force when reasonably necessary. Even the governor supports that. The point is, Commissioner, that crime stats dropped when these stakeout squads were in force. And as soon as the liberals worked their will and pulled this stakeout squad away, crime stats went right back up. We pay the penalty.
I must say, sir,
for
your
liberalism,
information is totally wrong. I happen to be very knowledgeable about crime statistics in the city of New York. And it is proven that since 1982 and up to this date, robbery statistics have dropped dramatically without the use of the SOU. For example, in commercial-type robberies, from 1982 at a rate of about 9,500 have dropped to less than 4,500 now. So this is without the intervention of the SOU.
Are you
However,
that
from the year 1970, Jerry, from the year...
I'm responding to your assertion that crime was on the upswing and that the SOU brought it down.
The stats
that, sir, is a canard.
Disagree with yours. Crime
let me give you some more stats from the FBI. Maybe they're wrong, all right? From 1970 to 1982, the years you're talking about. Serious crime went up 332%.
When you say serious crime, are you talking about the index crimes, which are the rapes, the robberies?
Yes, I'm talking about all of them. They're all lumped together. They're all lumped together.
No. The FBI statistics, as you know, Mort, include auto theft, include embezzlement, include crimes which are not a threat to human life. So that's my question.
No, these are serious crimes that are aggravated crimes. Aggravated in the sense that weapons were used, that break-ins were used, that you're right, that a lot of money was stolen.
Okay.
So it really lumps it all
Why
into
do you want to tie the police officer's hands? Why can't the police officer do his job?
I was a police officer, so I'm not trying to tie their hands. What I'm saying is that the 332% that Mort is talking about is not addressing the crime in question here. The stakeout unit was specifically established to deal with robberies. Robberies with violence attached thereto. And I think we ought to focus on that. Let's
focus on that, because I think that's important.
Did the stats go down when they were in force, yes or no?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge?
All right,
You're going to hear
next.
differently tonight, my friend.
Jerry, stand by, because next we're going to meet one of those courageous criminal hunters from the original stakeout team and find out if they were hunting criminals or, as the accusation has been made by some, hunting minorities. Stand by. Let me introduce, joining us at home base is Jerry Prizer, of course, who you met earlier in the segment. And at loudmouth number 1, we have Ronald Hampton, Director of National Affairs, National Black Police Association. Ronald, good evening to you, sir.
All right, how you doing?
And Jim Carrillo, who is the retired member of the stakeout unit of the NYPD. Jim, good evening to you, too, sir. Let me start with Ronald. You claim, of course, Ronald, that the stakeout units were racially put together and I guess you'd say, had premeditated plans to shoot down blacks. Do you have any evidence of that accusation?
Well, first of all, let me do this. I'm a 17-year veteran of the police department, so my experiences are from the ones that I actually lived myself. I'm not totally familiar with the instances of that in the city of New York, but in a neighboring police department in my area in Washington, D.C., in matter of fact, the PG County Police Department, some years ago indicted several police officers. Prince George's County.
Up in the Maryland area.
Exactly.
Which incidentally was a very racist county.
Exactly.
Up until maybe just 8 or 10 years ago.
And that still raises some questions there.
Okay.
Still raises some questions there. Some years ago, the legal system brought indictments against police officers and a number of police officers and officials for carrying out what they labeled at that time death squads. And the death squads, in the form of these stakeout units, actually had informants working for them, where they went out in the community and actually drummed up supports for these individuals to rob stores.
No, they'd say, hey, that little general store over there.
Exactly, and they just happened to be those stores that where the stakeout units were manned at. Where they
so it was really shooting gallery time.
Exactly. So they would walk into the stores, and even before they would get the idea that a robbery or a situation would go down, you would see them jump out.
Okay, now you pin that down. You pin that down specifically to Prince George's County, and let's face it, most of us who have been in been in and around this country for any length of time, know that Prince George's County at one time was highly visible as a KKK area. I mean, it was a real racist area just south of the Mason-Dixon line.
So we could say maybe whether or not, or raise the question of whether or not that's a national attitude.
Right.
And I sort of would say that my experience, not only in my police department and the police departments that I've had relationships with across the country and the other officers that I know, I would say the same kind of things exist. We could talk about the kind of mentality, the kind of conversations that go on in the roll call room. When I worked in patrol section, there's a mentality that exists in roll call rooms where police officers I hear would be begging to use their service revolver at nighttime. So when you hear some person talk about a police officer making a split-second decision on the scene whether or not he or she would use their service revolver, generally, in my opinion, they've made up their mind a long time ago because they were predisposed to use their service revolver by the method in which that they talked about using it in the roll call room. And those kind of things that happen.
Do they feel that way because of the leadership of their unit, because of the particular police department they work for, or because of racist feelings?
Well, I think a little bit of everything, because these individuals come to police departments with already predetermined ideas about certain things, and then we're all human, and then those kind of things are generated by the people who supervise you, generated by the people you socialize with, generated by the policy and mentality of the police department.
Anyone ever ask you, were you ever on a stakeout unit?
No.
You ever know anyone on a stakeout unit?
Some of the officers in my department when they used to use it.
Did you ever talk to them about being on a stakeout unit and whether indeed they were there for racist reasons?
The kind of things, not so much for those types of things, because my career in the police department has been one of people in my department and other departments knowing where I stood and the kind of person that I am.
What was your function in the police department?
I worked in patrol section for about 7 to 8 years, walked the footbeat, changed shifts, and did a number of things in the last, and then in the last...
Did you walk in Washington, D.C. or in Prince George County?
Oh, in Washington, D.C. That's why I'm a police officer in Washington, D.C.
All right, sir.
So,
Jim, let me come to you just a second. You risk your life daily in the stakeout units, and now you're being compared with, some people would compare you with the KKK or worse. Is there any justification in the outlandish charges that you have heard made that indeed some police just chomped at the bit to get on those stakeout units to blow blacks away or Hispanics away?
No, I don't think color was ever an issue. The public safety was.
Would you tell me if you knew that color was the issue, would you tell me?
Beg your pardon, sir?
If you knew that color was the issue, would you tell me?
Yeah, sure, but there was no issue.
Why would you tell me?
Well, because I think that would be a terrible thing if color was an issue. If people were just being blown away because of their color, that would be terrible. That would be a horrible thing. In fact, those people should be put away if that were the case.
All right, of the stakeouts that were around, Jerry, let me come to you. While we're in this issue, let's examine it thoroughly. Let's not be chicken. Let's look at it. While these stakeouts were going on, what was the percentage of blacks blown away versus whites blown away?
I recollect a figure that something like 242 confrontations, at least 238 or 239 were in fact minorities. But that was not the choice of the heroic police officers that were staked out. That's the nature of where crime comes from.
I have another question. Wait a second, I have another question. Were those stakeouts taking place in white neighborhoods or black neighborhoods? What percentage?
Well, they were taking place in neighborhoods where crime was rampant and where these storekeepers needed to have some measure of protection.
And where was that?
It was in black and Hispanic areas, which is where the high crime areas were, to the best of my knowledge.
Commissioner?
We need to deal with the reality of the situation. Your question was implicitly who was blown away. Every person killed by the stakeout unit, if the information I have received is accurate, was black. Number one. Number two, blacks represent, especially black males from the ages of 18 to 25, represent a small portion of the total black population in this country, which is 15%. And yet, statistically, of those killed by police officers, 89% of whom are white during the shooting, end up being 50+% of all people killed in the line of duty by police officers are blacks. So even if we created a situation where the stakeout unit per se, which existed in New York City, had no vestige of racism in it. Across the nation, we can prove the case that blacks are disproportionately killed, representing only 15% of the total population, and therefore I could make the argument that there's racism in affecting the law.
How does it justify disbanding these units, Commissioner, if indeed the criminals who were blown away were criminals and were black? What difference does it make?
Well, okay, well, one, in every instance where a person was killed in these situations, we do not have the information. Did the person have a revolver? Did the person have a loaded revolver? Was it the person's true intent to rob? Also, what alternative was available? Where were the police officers' position? Were they behind the people when they came in? And did they say freeze and the person turned and was shot? You know, that information maybe we can bring out through...
that information I'm sure would be available.
But one of the things that it raised in this particular area in the case, it talked about the policies and procedures of the police department, whether or not they was followed. The issue of entrapment was raised because of the fact that they had informers going out purposely directing these individuals after they had drummed up...
This is in the Prince George's County area.
Right, in Prince George's County. Actually drumming up the support and the impetus to send people into those particular areas.
How many people were convicted?
Several police officers and I think one high-ranking official of the police department who at all times were... Well,
you know, coming from the Washington, D.C. area,
okay,
maybe you can educate us a little bit in terms of Carl Rowan used an unlicensed gun to shoot a white swimmer who was using his pool. Okay. According to your brand of logic, could we then assume that Carl Rowan was staking out his pool to even up the odds? According to your brand of logic.
Carl Rowan wasn't staking out. Carl Rowan wasn't staking out his pool.
What was he doing with an unlicensed pistol?
But exactly, he's guilty of committing a crime just as much as the individual who
swimming in his pool is a crime.
The person who's swimming in his pool committed the crime. Listen to what I'm saying.
Well, let me just say something.
The person who's swimming in his pool committed the crime.
Let me just say something. I commend Carl Rowan for shooting a guy.
And believe me, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that.
Because I got one in my home, too, pal.
I have no problem with that.
And some son of a bitch wants to come into my home, bango.
I have no problem with that. But I do think this, that if Carl Rowan is guilty of committing a crime and he was in the possession of an unregistered firearm and ammo, then he ought to be tried equally with the person who committed a crime of trespassing on private property.
Not likely to happen. Bernie gets yes. Carl Rowan,
probably
no.
And it's probably because of who he is.
And it should. We're not doing the Carl Rowan bit. Right now, we're going to meet Dirty Herbie, all right? The Clint Eastwood of New York's Upper East Side. Stand by for Herbie. Joining us at Loudmouth number 2, let me introduce to you Herbert White's rare and fine bookstore owner in New York City. Herbie.
Hiya.
How are you, pal?
Okay.
Who the hell did your hair, General Electric?
I gotta keep an eye. Look.
Herbie, you're a store owner in New York City. Would you return to those stakeout squads? Would it make you feel safer?
I'd love it. I'd love it. I wish they started them tomorrow. And everybody on my block, I polled every store owner this morning before I came here. Every one of them wants it. Every one of them wants it today. Now.
You've compared... You've incurred, Herbie. You've kind of inferred that armed crime is like masturbation to the criminal, that we're encouraging them to repeatedly... Is that right?
Absolutely. They never get hurt for it. They like it. They have their fun. They terrify the guy who they terrify. They take his money. They go in for 20 minutes, and they come out, and they had a nice day.
Have you ever been robbed?
And you got to go to court 50 times, and then not a damn thing happens.
Have you ever been robbed?
Several times. I've been kidnapped. I've been robbed at gunpoint in my store. I've been attacked by an axe murderer. All right? And I've been attacked by a schizophrenic. In my store. I want somebody
protection, you're an intellectual?
I'm an intellectual. I'm not a young kid anymore. I'm an old guy. They see a few gray hairs. I'm like meat on the hoof.
Herbie, I gotta tell you, you've really, I mean, you've been robbed, you've been kidnapped, you've been...
Caught them, too. Chased them and caught them.
You did?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Seems like the only thing that hadn't happened to you, haven't been raped yet.
Something to look forward to.
Looking for. All right. So you would say... So you would tell me, Herbie, you would tell me, what about if you can't get the death squads back? Do you have adequate police protection? Do you feel comfortable in your neighborhood?
No. I lock the shop every time I leave. Every day. Every day, I have 2 or 3 people coming in, looking to sell you, let's say, a book that maybe they bought, maybe they stole, but I know they're looking over my shop. There's a guy waiting outside when the guy comes in. If my answer is wrong, if I don't look a little rough, if I don't talk out of the bottom of my voice, it's gone. If I leave my partner in the shop who is a woman, I tell her lock it every time I leave. I'm in the best neighborhood in New York.
The hell kind of a way is that to do business?
$1,000 a month for a room.
How much you paying rent?
A lot of money.
A lot of money?
Yeah, a lot of money. My
So
landlord gives
you really
me a
don't
good
feel
deal,
too
so I don't
comfortable.
want to
Let me go back to Ronald. Don't you think, Ronald, let me come back to you a second, all right? Don't you think that by bringing these stakeout units back, the publicity alone would cause criminals to at least think twice about busting into a store?
Well, I think the police department has several responsibilities. There's an enforcement part of it, and then there's a part that deals with the responsibilities that police have in terms of proactive prevention and protection of their community. And we listened to earlier, I listened to earlier someone quote some statistics about serious crime in America, but during the same time period, the FBI had put out some statistics to talk about the kind of citizen, the results of the kind of citizen-participated crime prevention program that even like Mr. Herbert would have participated in terms of... Mr. Weiss, excuse me. Would have participated in terms of bringing some kind of tranquility and some sort of peace and raising the quality of life in his particular community. And those kind of statistics talk about that crime had reduced 70 and 80% because people started getting involved in the process to bring about peace in their community.
I like people getting involved, you know.
I'll tell you what I think we ought to do.
Why don't you get your store owners involved? Get each of them with a
I tell you what, I have suggested to the people on my block that we buy like a lifeguard chair, have a guy sitting up on that chair with a shotgun, and then... Wait, let me just finish. And then, you know what I'd have? I'd have 5 cops on the block making sure I don't shoot the wrong guy. And then I would have police protection.
What we haven't addressed here...
Commissioner, they're making it sound like there's no crime in this country.
There's crime everywhere, but what we haven't addressed is what causes a criminal to be fearful about the commission of a crime is not
someone's going to blow his ass away.
That may be part of it. Not the desire to commit the crime. The desire to commit the crime, if you're disposed to being a criminal, is there. The fear occurs when he is fearful of being apprehended. The best deterrent is to have a uniformed officer, visible, or to have a methodology whereby the criminal is fearful. I live in the city. I live in the city.
The commissioner,
You carry a gun?
That would be right. That would be all right if we had a police officer to stand in front of all 113,000 businesses in the city. But we don't have that many police officers.
Well, no, we don't have that many police officers, but we can develop different approaches to make more cost-effective law enforcement.
We've been developing different approaches for the last 40 years, Commissioner, and nothing seems to work.
It hasn't happened.
Mr. Jerry,
it hasn't happened.
We have...
That's why you need the guardian angels. That's why neighborhoods... Excuse me. That's why neighborhoods are calling out for the guardian angels. Restaurant Row is calling for guardian angels. More shopkeepers are arming themselves, and shopkeepers that can't even get the license are beginning to shoot back because the police have failed. Not the individual policeman. He has been shackled. He has been prevented from doing his job, and you don't have enough cops, and you'll never have enough cops. It's up to the individual to take charge of his own destiny. Yeah. You have it.
I think that in my own opinion, there's some half-truths there. We need to be doing the kind of things I support, and a lot of other folks support.
What are the kind of things you support, Ronald?
Well, a lot of folks support. I support people working in the neighborhoods, citizen patrol groups, those kind of things. I think there's a value in that. And if you're talking about me protecting my community, then I think that I have a vested interest in my community being safe and me participating in the process. But I think there's an extreme point of this, and that is when you arm citizens and other people who may have guns, and I don't have anything wrong with owning a gun or in your shop or whatever have you. But when a situation like this arises, and then you have a situation where someone here in the audience's daughter or son happen to be shot by somebody who raises a gun and shoots it at someone who committed a crime, then what do you tell that individual whose daughter you just shot down by a spray of gun? And I mean, and not in I'm not talking about the general rule.
I've heard that argument before. You're taking a horror story and making a general rule.
I'm talking about when the actions of a police officer is
You were asked a question before, and you avoided it. And the question was, will the stakeout squad inhibit and put crime where it belongs? Will it reduce crime?
Hell no.
And you danced away from that.
Crime.
What's your answer?
It has an immediate impact.
Will the stakeout squad work?
No, it don't reduce crime. It has an immediate impact on the crime that occurs. It has an immediate impact on that crime. It don't stop crime. It don't stop crime.
Why don't we let
Clearly,
you know part of it?
Did crime go down in the subway after get shot the kids?
Clearly the stakeout unit didn't work from 68. Clearly it didn't work from 68 to 73. It was discontinued. It was discontinued because it was felt to be...
discontinued because it didn't work, Commissioner. It was discontinued because of the sap-sucking, pablum-puking liberals.
Including the New York Times was against it, but let's not forget that Arthur Sulzberger, publisher of the New York Times, is a New York City pistol licensee. He packs a gun, but he wanted the squad disbanded. So there you are.
A greater alternative, a better alternative evolved from the stakeout unit, and that was the robbery alert team. And perhaps later on in the show, we can deal with that as an alternative. It wasn't cost effective because you had so many police officers sitting, not just for days, but for weeks and sometimes, and Officer Cirillo can speak to that, in terms of months waiting for things to happen. Over the course of from 79 to 82, that was the total life of the group?
No, it didn't go as far as 82.
I mean, 68 to 73, I'm sorry.
Yeah, about that, around 73, 74.
How many, you were on the stakeout for how long?
I was on from the inception around at 68, and I was out in around 72, 73.
How many robberies were you and your group alone able to stop?
Well, we terminated, the total amount of robbers that were terminated was around 43. We captured about 4 times that amount alive. If they capitulated or they didn't have a weapon, hand in the pocket, they were brought in alive.
So it doesn't sound to me, Commissioner, like this was any racially motivated situation. If they captured 4 times as many as they killed, and you say it wasn't cost effective in a 4-year period, we're talking about over 150 people, criminals that were captured.
But the FBI tells you of each one that is arrested, they've committed at least 6 or 7 felonies.
They were all
up to that point,
offenses.
correct? In addition to which, when you stop him, you're stopping him from future crimes. Right. So those figures are a lot better than we're talking about.
But catch him in the middle of the crime rather than later with witnesses who don't know what you got. A cop says, I saw that man do that, and you got him. You got a professional, trained witness, not a guy who's
Why don't we deal with the robbery alert team now? Because the flow mandates that we deal with it.
All right, let's do that then, because we'll in the next segment, meet a guy who thinks that we should slap the handcuffs on the police instead of the criminals. Stay with us. William Petrina joins us at Loudmouth number 2, and he is a criminal attorney. William, I understand that you think that the police are handcuffed, all right? You don't think they're handcuffed.
No, I don't.
All right. In fact, you think their power...
Sorry, I can't hear you more.
All right, here. You think their power maybe even gives them too much latitude in deciding who the criminals are. What the hell cop shows you been watching, pal?
None at all. As a matter of fact, I defend police officers. I'm a criminal defense attorney and a former prosecutor in Hudson County who headed their special investigative unit. You see, the problem, Mort, with the stakeout units is you cannot set up a factual scenario wherein everything is taken into account. Now, Herbie's at my right here, and he was espousing how he wants police officers in his store. What happens when a bullet goes astray and possibly hits Herbie in the head or some other innocent bystander? That's our problem.
That's better than taking a shot at getting shot by the kid that come in to rob you, which is much more likely to happen.
We have to be...
And it's happened to me. All right? I had a guy pull the trigger and a brand new pistol and the gun didn't go off. All right?
Well, let Jim step in here.
New York City Stakeout Squad was an assembly of the finest firearms experts ever assembled in the history of the police department. They had 252 armed confrontations.
That may be true,
Not
Jim.
one can of beans was hit.
Jim, that may be true, but the police officer cannot control the factual scenario. That is the variable.
We were able to.
Not one store owner.
Not one store owner, not one
What the hell are you talking about?
Not one person.
We
Shoot
just
the
keep
hell out of
going
your
on, Jim.
hypothesis.
The only thing the police
someone
officer
does
can't...
make a mistake and someone dies.
Well,
then what happens?
You're talking if. He's telling you what happened.
I'm sure.
Your hypothesis, William, is dead.
Stakeout Squad wasn't there. Some innocent people would have been killed.
It's not going to deter. If you're talking about a drug addict and he even hears about a stakeout squad, that's not going to stop him from getting the money to get his next hit. And that's what we're talking about in law enforcement. There has to be something to deter.
We heard that in 4 years, his group, all right, Jim's group, killed 42
Yeah, none of them are going to be
Believe
able to
me,
rob
that
again.
deters me. Let me ask Jim.
Mr. Down.
Let me come back to Jim. All your years in service, how often did you see cops overstep their bounds, all right? Overstep their bounds and maybe do something that was illegal. Throw down a gun if a guy didn't have a weapon.
I never witnessed that. I've heard of it, but I've never seen it. And personally, I've heard people speak of it. I never personally have seen it.
But you know it happens.
I was told that it happened. However, I don't know if it actually has happened because I've never seen it happen. No. I've heard people say that this has happened, but I have never personally seen it. I've seen many police officers, if they ever overstepped their boundaries, it was in what was their quest, public safety.
Well, the
But
problem
what about
Go ahead.
Detective Shea, who killed the 11-year-old kid in Jamaica? What about Officer Torsney, who walked up to a young man in the Brownsville area and just blew him away?
Eddie Burns.
Well, here we're...
Yeah, well,
Here we're...
None of those things.
Here we're hearing a lot of individual horror stories.
I'm sure.
But overall, we've heard Jim Carrillo here tell us that indeed, out of 4 years of stakeouts, not a can of beans was blown away, just the crooks.
Well, I would submit that the law of averages are against it then, okay? You're running...
What a
How
hell
many
of
of
a way
those
to go through life,
storekeepers
William.
would have been killed that he killed a guy? How many of those guys would have ended up killing a storekeeper out of those 45 he killed?
All right. Next, we meet a man who recently killed an intruder in his home to protect his family and was prosecuted for his actions. All right. Let me tell you, I don't think there's anyone that loves their law enforcement officials more than the audience of this program, all right? And will protect and defend our law enforcement officials because we know they're doing their damnedest to protect us. Now, here's a situation coming up for you where there were no law enforcement officials available at that time. What do you do then? Do you bow down and kiss the milk-fed slippers of some liberal? No. You do what these folks did. Let me go to Vincent and Annette Rispoli. Vincent, how are you?
Fine, thanks.
Tell me what happened the night you and your wife arrived home, May 19th.
Oh, we came in the door, and we had some burglars in the house. When the guy came out of the room, he pulled a foot-long screwdriver on me. I had a gun in my pocket. I pulled the gun. He had another guy in our bedroom, and he came out. He turned around, he went back in the bedroom, tried to get out the window.
What'd you do with the gun?
I held it on him. This guy turned around that I was holding in the living room. He ran into the bedroom. When I went into the bedroom, they were both standing in there with screwdrivers in their hands, and I shot both of them.
Did you shoot to kill?
No.
How do you know? Were you shooting out of fear?
Yes, I was shooting out of fear.
So you just aimed as close as you could, right? Did you kill the guy?
Yes.
Good for you.
Kill him! That's what he needed.
Now listen to this, folks. What has been the effect on you and your beautiful bride following that traumatic experience?
Well, I was arrested.
Spend the night in jail?
I plead guilty to a misdemeanor. Now I have to relocate because the guy that did live was let out on a low bail, and he never went back to court. He was supposed to be back in court on June 30th, and he skipped bail.
He might be waiting for you somewhere.
William, let me introduce, please, William Brewer, who is Mr. Rispoli's attorney. What was your client charged with, and what was the maximum sentence he could have received?
Well, under the original investigation, he was being investigated for a homicide. You have to remember, every time somebody pulls a weapon, even if it's in your home, you have to have reasonable cause to fire, and he was facing 25 years to life on the initial investigation.
Okay, so wait a second, folks. I'll get to you in a second.
After an 8-hour investigation in the precinct house, videotape statements, cooperation with the police, he was indicted for felony possession of a weapon because he had the weapon on him before he entered the home. In a plea negotiation, he was allowed to plead guilty to a misdemeanor. He received a $500 fine, but he's going to receive a certificate of relief from civil disabilities and forfeitures, which means this incident can never be used against him in employment.
Vincent, why did you have... Good. Why did you have the gun in your possession at the time?
Well, where I work, it's the cocaine capital of the United States. The streets are not really safe anymore. You know, the police can only do so much. You know, they can't be around all the time.
All right. I think that's a damn good reason. Jerry, I understand. Let's understand something now. Let's understand that Jerry Prizer, who's executive director of the Federation of New York Rifle and Pistol Clubs, has an award that he'd like to make. You were charged $500. Let's see if we can even that up.
The Federation is pleased and proud to present to Vince Rispoli, in the great tradition of a Bernie Getz who also defended himself, certificate, which is a Courageous Citizen Award, and we're going to replace the $500 that son of a bitch judge took away from him.
You know,
in addition...
Let me tell you, Jerry, let me just interrupt you a second. It's not so much the son of a bitch judge, but those legislators who make it possible for the judges to have to give that type of...
And last but not least, we have a businessman in the audience who owns Pistol Licensing of Long Island, and he's a gun dealer. He is going to file Vince Rispoli for a legitimate full-carry pistol license and give him a pistol of his choice at no charge.
Next, we're going to speak to the audience, find out how they would defend themselves. Stand by. All right. Now, let's talk to the citizens. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, Jerry. I just want to let you know that I agree with you about everything that you have to say about police officers constantly being shackled up, and we need more people like you to go ahead and voice your opinion about it.
My question's for the commissioner. If we've already established that in the past few years crime rate still hasn't gone down, whether or not...
We didn't establish that.
Well, that's with the FBI. We said that whether or not the stakeouts are the answer, obviously the time has come to reevaluate the methods because they don't seem to be working.
I agree that we should reevaluate the methods, and I think that what we need to employ is something like the robbery alert team, which would respond to electronic impulses when a robbery was in commission, and then overwhelm the robbery.
And get there in time to put cotton in the bullet hole, all right? Go ahead.
So all I have to say is all you're doing is justifying the criminals committing crimes. Once again, the system is protecting the criminals and not the victims. That's all you're doing.
Complain about how much it costs. The stakeouts were too costly and time-consuming. But everyone that you arrest is in jail for who knows how long, and we're paying for him there.
All right, you know, maybe what we ought to do is reinculcate the stakeout squads and give them plastic bullets. Would that work? Plastic bullets. No, plastic bullets will kick the crap out of you, all right? Would you be in favor of that, Commissioner?
I would be in favor of something that would be a tranquilizing effect. In fact, I called...
Tranquilizing? Why?
Wait a minute.
Wait a second.
I don't mean... Let the audience fully understand what a tranquilizing effect is. A tranquilizing effect puts the person right out. And I called today to Washington to see how far along we are with that. The rubber bullet or plastic bullet is equally as effective. The purpose is to disarm and prevent the person from carrying out the crime. The plastic bullet, the rubber bullet will do the same thing.
The commission is saying, let's tranquilize them and then put them in prison and spend $50,000 a year so they can play ping pong in an air-conditioned cell. And I say, shoot the bastards.
All right, well, let's keep talking about this. You folks go ahead, run the credits. We want to talk about this some more. You folks at home aren't going to get this because we're going to raise hell now. Now, you say that what we should do...
Raise the body count.
Raise the body.
I'm Roland Smith. Next on the news at 10, you'll see the homemade video of a Metro-North cop parading nude at Grand Central Station. Also, a jury says guilty to veteran Congressman Mario Biaggi, and why some prisoners are getting...
It's a winter wonderland of fun! Oh, yeah! It's a summer sizzler of savings during Crazy Eddie's Christmas Super Sale in August. Save a bucket of bucks with the lowest sale prices ever on car stereos and portables during Crazy Eddie's Christmas and August Car Stereo and Portable Super Sale. And when you see Crazy Eddie, enter for a chance to win a 4-day Jamaica vacation at the Wyndham Rose Hall Beach Hotel via the Jamaica Shuttle. See Crazy Eddie now. His Christmas and August Super Sale prices are insane.